Welcome back to the show. Today, I want to start with something a little different. Look around you right now. How much of what you see requires you to read? There's perhaps a couple notes jotted down on some paper, a poster in your living room, or if you're on your daily commute, perhaps a billboard. Public signage, you look down at your phone. Well, if you can't read, that's going to be tough. When we read fluently, literacy is something we take for granted, and yet it's one of the most basic and most important skills that we have. Reading impacts everything. Whether we'll get a job, our ability to understand a medical prescription and take care of our health, it's also the way we get informed and form our opinions and navigate the world. And yet, today in the United States, reading is not something we're good at. Literacy rates are declining, and it's been happening for a while. People can read, just not very well. Last year, a study from the National Literacy Institute showed that 54% of Americans couldn't read at a 6th grade level. Let that sink in for a minute. It means that half the population doesn't read better than they did as 11-year-old kids. What's more, since the COVID pandemic, a lot of young people have been delayed in learning how to read, and they're not catching up. So, how did we get here? And what can we do to turn this situation around? How can we learn to recognize what good literacy looks like? This is what this series is all about.
You could read an entire sentence, be able to sound it out perfectly, but if you don't understand what you're reading, then we're not getting anywhere.
With the families, that question of how are we going to get our kids caught up can be really overwhelming because they never learned how to read and they don't know how to support their kid.
Often when we talk about social change, we think about protests, new laws, people helping people, and stories of redemption and justice. But social change, it can start with recognizing statewide issues and making a commitment to improve. Social change, it's a new education journey for both families and teachers. This is Impact in Action. On this podcast, we travel around the country to see what social change looks like on the ground. We tell the real stories behind every life-changing impact solution. We're MGT, a provider of specialized technology and advisory solutions. Social transformation, it's what we do every day. So let's take you to the heart of the action. Today, we're in Utah with Savannah Hunt and Susie Estrada.
I think impact in action looks like laughter because I don't have to worry about how I'm showing up. We're working collaboratively towards this goal, and it's going to benefit everyone.
I'm Chase Christiansen. Welcome back to Impact in Action. Today, we're traveling to Utah, a state with big commitments to literacy goals. And first things first, you know how we typically start these. Let's set the scene. So, Utah, the Beehive State, a place known for, yes, it's actually not bees. I'll do it again from the top. So, Utah, the Beehive State, a place known for entrepreneurship and families, but mostly for its landscapes. Some of the most iconic scenery in the US is here in Utah. I'm talking about red rock deserts in the south, snowy mountains up north, and it is National Park Central. In terms of culture, you'll most likely know Utah for the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. LDS faithfuls have a strong influence on social and cultural life here. And by that I mean Utah's values remain quite traditional and universal.
There are a lot of Mormons here, so that obviously has an impact on that kind of more conservative culture coming through.
This voice belongs to Savannah Hunt.
I feel like we have a lot in common with the Midwest in terms of just kind of that a wholesome, maybe conservative culture.
Savannah grew up in Utah. She went to school here, and now she's made education her specialty. She works for the Utah State Board of Education, the government body that oversees the public school system here.
I run our 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. So I work mostly with after-school programs and summer programs.
So Savannah knows a whole lot about education. And today, she's going to help us understand why and how Utah is struggling with literacy. But before we get into this, let's just clear something up. On the day-to-day, Savannah's job is to take care of Utah's communities and turn schools into something more than just a set of classrooms.
It's funny because anytime I tell someone what my job is, they always go, "Oh, you're a teacher." And I go, "No, I'm not a teacher. I have never been a teacher. Most of my background is in youth development and after-school programs and nonprofits." I've always been very interested in policy and the way that that shapes our society, and knew that I wanted to spend a career working with women and children and helping families. And I started off after college. I worked with Boys and Girls Clubs for a while, with Big Brothers Big Sisters, doing mentoring. I worked here at the Utah After School Network for a couple of years, training after-school professionals. And now I'm in this job getting to create our state policy around what a quality after-school program looks like.
Every year, the USBE gets funding from the feds to distribute to schools. And this money goes to extracurricular activities, family engagement meetings, things like that. Schools can also apply for grants to get a little something extra. And Savannah's job is to run these grants. She finds the right candidates and basically makes sure that the funding goes to the schools that need it most. It's important stuff.
In the fall, I'm doing a lot of orientation for my grantees. In the winter, we're doing more monitoring and site visits. And then kind of back into the spring, back into that grant competition. So I'm making sure that we're using those tax dollars appropriately, that all the funding's being used for what it's supposed to be used for, to help serve Utah students.
Beyond teaching, a lot of education actually looks like this. It's hard to fathom when you're not in it, but a school system is very much a system. It's got many parts.
We've got 50 different states and a number of territories that each have their own autonomy to some degree in terms of education. And I know many people at the federal level are trying to increase that level of autonomy. So we might see a lot more differences in the coming years in how, if you grew up in Utah versus Oregon or Alabama or New York, your education might be vastly different.
It's important to understand that distinction. In the United States, education is not really thought of as a federal level question. Every state gets to decide for themselves. It's really like we have 50 different educational systems. So when it comes to literacy, that makes a big difference. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. But for now, what you need to remember is that Utah, our little case study we're discussing today, is a state known for being pretty innovative when it comes to education. The USBE doesn't just focus on teaching in school programs, they also have a commitment to family engagement. In fact, if you were curious, when you type in family engagement and Utah in Google, there's one name that keeps popping up.
Susie Estrada. I am the Student Support, Parent, and Family Engagement Specialist.
Yep, we've got a second guest, folks. Susie's job at the USBE is to support families and connect with communities around schools.
I work with schools and school leaders to support them in developing their programs, strategies, policies around family engagement.
Before she was in this role, Susie was a teacher. She was on the other side.
I taught in preschool classrooms. One of my first jobs was a fully inclusive program in California as an assistant, but I had great mentors. And then I've developed some curriculum, gang prevention and intervention. It's a pretty big range, but I think that no matter what it was, it always came down to engaging with the families and getting to know more of the context for the student, like what they need.
During the pandemic, Susie was running after-school and preschool programs to support those families who were struggling with remote schooling. And from there, she started looking for work beyond the school walls. That's how she found her position at the USBE. In recent months, Susie and Savannah have joined forces to take on the issue of literacy. In fact, they now form something of a duo. Between the two of them, Susie and Savannah have classroom experience, school program expertise, and a history of working with families. They were pretty well placed to tackle the challenge of literacy. And I know, at this stage, it's like, Chase, what is the issue with literacy? Let's get to this question. It's a tricky one. On the surface, if you look at Utah's stats, they're not bad. 90% of the people are literate. Just for comparison, in California, which California has one of the worst rates in the country, literacy is at 76%. So it could be worse. But the thing is, reading ability in Utah is not so good. In 2024, only 1 out of 4 Utahns are proficient readers. Now, what does being proficient mean? What's the science behind that? We asked Savannah to lay it out for us.
So children need to be able to look at letters and know the sounds. They need to hear a sound and know what letters make that sound to be able to decode what the word is. But I don't want to say more importantly, but slightly more important than decoding is the comprehension.
So step 1, decode. Step 2, make the sounds. And step 3, actually understand what you're seeing.
You could read an entire sentence, be able to sound it out perfectly, but if you don't understand what you're reading, then we're not getting anywhere.
This part is important. It goes beyond just understanding a word you've never seen before. Think about it. Even as an adult, if you open a college textbook on a random page, you might read an entire sentence and not know what it means. Because while the words might be familiar, you're missing the context, the topical vocabulary, the tools to really get around the material. So literacy is not just about reading, it's about thinking critically. And the more that you can read and think, the better you can write too. One thing kind of leads to the next, right? So that's the other thing. When you're in school around 3rd grade, reading becomes a pivotal part of your journey. Savannah has a saying for it.
It's learning to read versus reading to learn. So from K through 3, you're still learning how to read, and your assignments and projects and schooling is all done with that in mind, that you don't know how to read yet, that you might not know how to read the instructions on this assignment fully. Whereas from 4th grade onward, you have to know how to read to learn. They're expecting you to be able to read a textbook, read an article, read the instructions yourself. You have to know how to read to be a good learner on their own and like a good consumer of information.
And that brings us back to the literacy problem that Utah is facing. The number of people who are literate in a full comprehensive sense is declining. Currently, less than half of 3rd graders in Utah read at grade level. Half. So kids at the age of 7 or 8 who are about to start using reading as a tool for learning new things, they can't read well enough to make that transition. And it's going to impact their education long term.
I actually worked when I was in after school mostly with teenagers. And I was helping them with math homework and literacy homework, and that even these teenagers sometimes were only reading at like a 3rd or 4th grade level. Once you're behind, if you don't get caught up, you stay behind.
So you see, literacy matters. It's what gives us the skills to learn autonomously. Susie would put it this way.
A lot of it goes back to developing your identity as a learner and as a reader and really being engaged with it because you think it's fun.
Oh yeah, fun, of course. I nearly forgot that part. But Susie says it's a critical part of the process.
I know when I'm really invested in a book as a child and as an adult, it was, please stop talking to me. I need to get to the next chapter. So I've applied that as a preschool teacher. Like, let's make this fun. Let's make this relevant. Like, I can't get you to read this history text that's heavy on jargon until I can get this foundational piece ready.
That joy of sitting down with a good book, it's what builds enthusiasm for learning. It arms children and adults with resilience and focus. This is something Susie learned from experience.
Yeah, I love reading. I loved reading as a kid. And my mom was very much on the I don't care what you're reading as long as you're reading. So, that's funny because I actually grew up in Southern California. And I don't think they had them in Utah, but in California, the romance novels at the checkout lane, even if they had the abs on there, that maybe should have been a red flag for my mom. She was like, if you want it, here you go. Like, enjoy, read away. And, it's not best practice anymore, but like even speed reading, how fast can you read? Like, that was a game for me and I enjoyed doing it.
For Susie, reading became a pleasurable thing. But truth be told, it's a different experience for every kid. I mean, reading's a really big task, which means not every child will develop that skill at the same speed. I mean, even between Susie and Savannah, you'll hear different stories.
I do remember one day, these very basic sentences, just basically trying to guess what it was based off the picture. And my dad covering up the picture with his hand and saying, no, you have to sound out the letters. You can't just read the picture. And I was just frustrated and just wanted to guess based on the picture. And I do remember in kindergarten, we were individually tested on recognizing each letter. And I remember I knew every single one except for lowercase q. For some reason, I was like, I don't know what that is. I have no clue. Never heard it. I've never seen that in my life. But I did learn to love reading. I think I spent a lot of my spare time in school reading. If, I finished my assignment early, I'd pull out a book.
So she turned things around. Anyways, it goes to show reading experiences vary from person to person. And beyond the science of reading, social factors can contribute too. In 2022, when cracks started to show in Utah's stats, there were a few things playing out. Number one, the COVID pandemic. Remote learning put a spotlight on social inequalities. Attendance dropped. It was harder to check in with families. And there were gaps in resources, technologies, even time allocated to school. But on top of that,
I think in the last couple of decades, with No Child Left Behind, making sure students are always moving up a grade, even if they're not totally prepared. They might be in kindergarten and leave kindergarten behind, not knowing how to read, and that kind of just continues.
The No Child Left Behind Act was passed in Congress in 2002 when George W. Bush was in office. The idea was to increase the role of the federal government when it comes to education. In practice, the federal government set a number of standardized tests. And to be clear, Savannah is not saying it's bad for students. It's just that there's more pressure now to get kids to just pass.
There's also a lot of social and emotional ramifications of there. I think there was kind of a stigma to being held back. Obviously 2022 was also hard being right after COVID. Those couple of years were even tougher for students. And when we don't have enough paraeducators, we don't have enough resource teachers, we have classrooms of 30, 35 kids, that's hard for a teacher to be able to effectively engage their high-performing kids and not leave them bored while still making sure they're going slow enough and individual enough for their kids that are behind.
So the COVID pandemic wasn't the end-all be-all explanation for what was going on with literacy. It just pulled back the curtain on some issues. Like, for example, how reading methods had changed.
The way maybe I was taught 30 years ago how to read and the different sounds, it's slightly different now. We're thinking, it's not sa, it's s. We're being very specific. And so even our teachers need to kind of get a little mindset shift in embracing science of reading and the letters.
So standardization doesn't yet apply to the science of reading, but more and more teachers are demanding it. Susie has noticed.
Something that we've heard from our teachers needing to know how to teach these skills. So it's those specific strategies that our teachers are asking for. And we have a lot of different pathways to licensure, right? So I need to know how to teach my student to read, right? I need to know how to engage families, because then if you engage families, research is showing that the better you engage families, the better they support learning. And the more that they support learning, the better their kids do. So it's that full cycle.
Family engagement has a big part to play. But to do that, you need time.
Yeah, the overwhelming reoccurring theme is capacity. So, without a designated family engagement person, the task of family engagement is given to someone that already has a full time job. So, the school social worker, school counselor, a teacher, the administrator. A lot of our schools don't have a designated family engagement person. We do see the ones that do are having some more positive outcomes. It's been highlighted in a few of our bills and even legislative sessions. Schools that do have that designated point of contact can really make sure that it's being done in a high quality way.
So, yeah, to make family engagement a priority, we need to give it some space within the school walls. Then, in an ideal world, this kind of engagement continues on at home. Now, I think it's safe to say that every family wants to give their child the best possible start in life. But not everyone is working with the same set of circumstances.
In a lot of underserved communities, we have parents who are working full time and might not have as much time to dedicate to helping their child with their homework or to be reading out loud together. That can take half an hour to an hour a day to do all those things that not everyone maybe has time for. So it can certainly be different for every family what they have available to participate in.
Not every family can afford to spend time on schoolwork. And that's not a judgment, by the way. It's just kind of a harsh reality. Another thing, life in Utah looks really quite different depending on where you are. Urban areas like Salt Lake City are a big hub for services and diversity. It's easier to get that help. But down south, it's quieter. In the part of Utah where you'll find Red Rock and Deep Slot canyons, it takes an hour to get from one small town to the next. So when it comes to education, school districts have to structure themselves differently. Here's Susie again.
Solutions that we would have for urban school districts will not look the same way in a rural school district. The example that I'm thinking of specifically, it was one of our community partners, as a community organization that was going to host some events for schools in a rural area. And they were asking, as you should, how should we structure this? When should we do it? What topics? And things that would typically be done at an urban school district. So do it after hours or on the weekend. The school district was very clear, don't do that here. That's not going to work.
That makes sense, right? If everything is out of reach, you can't easily access services in other locations. Hell, even just getting school supplies is more difficult. So you need to make sure that everything is happening at school. These are the small ways in which literacy can be impacted every day. Teaching methods, legislation, pandemics, access to school, work capacity, social inequalities, a lot goes into it. It's a complex equation. But to big problems, big solutions, right? So in March 2022, the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, signed a bill into law. Remember this, it's called SB 127. And this bill committed millions of dollars to improve early literacy across the state.
The main goal of that bill was that 70% of Utah students would be reading at grade level by third grade by 2027, which having 70% of students reading at grade level was already a lofty goal. And when I heard 2027, I was like, oh, that is soon.
Just as a reminder, current student proficiency levels are around 48%. So big way to go until 70. But Susie says that's what Utah needed.
Go big or go home.
Seriously, though, what Susie's going to say next, it's something we need to think about.
When a goal like this is written in, it's big and it's ambitious, but why not? We can strive for a big goal and we can hold ourselves and our students and their families and our community to those expectations. And I think really the bigger message there is, I believe that you can, and so you will. Rather than is a realistic goal saying only 30% of our kids. Well, then what does that mean? So when I went into high school, one of the first things that was said to us was that half of us would drop out. As a freshman, you hear that and it's okay, well, that's either me or my best friend that's standing next to me. And what does that say to us as developing humans about our potential and who we are. So 70%, I mean, 100% might have been better to capture all of our students because maybe they're hearing like 30% of us won't be there. But 70%, it's a lofty goal, but it's also saying we believe that we can do this. And, my hope is that we will.
So yeah, sometimes it's about saying that you have faith it can work. Oh, and another thing worth noting, SB 127 targeted third graders specifically because, like Savannah said, that's a key moment in a kid's school life. So a lot was promised there, but there were reasons to be hopeful.
A lot of SB 127 was actually based on a similar bill out of Mississippi, I believe. And Mississippi, my understanding is, has had excellent strides and have improved a ton. And they historically have kind of had the lowest rates of literacy and various education measures. So I think when the folks here in Utah had seen that, that was kind of what got people thinking about science of reading and implementing some various projects here around it.
We won't bore you with the details, but what you should know is this bill is a big commitment to improving family engagement, and it integrates the science of reading in schools across the state. It also mandates the USBE to hire contractors to do the work, which sends a message out to the public. It's saying, we want to go beyond compliance, really do the work, and do it with the right people, which I would say is really the reason Susie and Savannah were brought in to help with the recruitment for contractors.
We were asked to sit in on part of that call for proposals for vendors to submit their contracts. So each applicant was doing a presentation on how they would do the training, what are the resources they were using. Some of the other applicants had very strong science of reading background, and some of the other applicants had very strong community engagement background. Both of these components are important. We cannot just have one or the other. We really need both components.
The team at MGT presented a plan that brought everything together, and that really mirrored how the bill was written.
MGT as an organization has worked on other parts of SB 127, so they already did have a lot of experience. There were some small tweaks or just clarifications that were needed, but it was clear that they were the most well-rounded. So their contract was approved in the fall by the board themselves, and then we started the cohort, I think, late fall, early winter of that year.
The USBE was keen to be in the field, and MGT answered that need. We proposed to work with a cohort system. In short, groups of schools work together to train and learn from each other, and they then get to work on their own set of goals in tandem too.
And so it's very individualized. Every member fills out their own needs assessment, their own roadmap of what they want to do at their school or district. And the folks at MGT really work to do some individual coaching and kind of guide them in making their own plans. And MGT also comes out to Utah in person a couple times a year to do full day professional learning sessions.
By 2027, the USBE wants their data to show some progress, have a little bit better stats, But they also hope that the quality of experience will improve. Susie wants kids to love reading again.
With literacy, the not so obvious would be that love for learning. Like, are you observing that your students are choosing to read? What are they reading? Are they more engaged? Like, families at home, does your child choose to read on their own beyond that mandatory 30 minutes that their teacher might have given? And you can ask students directly, like, do you enjoy reading? What is your, connection with reading? Would you choose to read? What would you choose to read? Those different things that are conveying messages about literacy and, reading is cool and things like that.
And of course, another goal of the work is to make new connections with families. It takes a village to raise a child and help them catch up.
That question of how are we going to get our kids caught up can be really overwhelming. And for educators that are so invested in just, we want our kids to be okay and happy and successful and healthy. If nothing else, that strong sense of connection and relationship with each other, which I think that commodity really goes a long way because it is hard. It's always been difficult. It's different when you've been with the families and they're crying because they never learned how to read and they don't know how to support their kid.
That's right. at the end of the day, it's corrective work. And it's not just for children, but for families too.
Some of those things, it's really just about a mind shift, pointing out to families like, hey, like you're already doing some of this. It's just about acknowledging it, knowing that you're doing it, that self-talk, and then going through books together and seeing them from a strength-based perspective where you are talented, you are skilled, you are smart, you are able, you're already doing these things. We're just going to support you to kick it up a notch maybe, but like you're doing a great job.
So I know what you're thinking. It's been 30 minutes and we've barely scratched the surface here. We're only beginning to understand the literacy problem, but there's so much we haven't covered. Like, how do you recreate a climate of trust with families and get them to engage? What's needed to teach educators new skills, and is the USBE actually on track to reach its goals? Well, folks, for all of these questions and more, you'll have to tune in next week. That's right, class is dismissed. We'll pick up on this next time. And before we leave today, a final word from Savannah. For all of you out there who might be struggling with literacy, just a little nugget of wisdom to keep thinking about until next time.
Impact is such an important word because you can't control what a kid actually learns, but we can control our own actions. So hopefully parents and educators can work together as partners. But yeah, I would say if your student does attend school, then first thing, reach out to their teacher. We're talking very first steps. Are you aware of what they're learning in class? Are you aware of what their homework is? Then reaching out to the teacher and saying, hey, I'm recognizing that my student maybe is behind or that they're not reading, and letting that teacher give you some tips about how you can implement some of these things. At the end, it's on the student, but we're going to do everything we can to make that happen and empower them, give them the tools they need.
Hope that helps. And on that note, let us thank Savannah Hunt for giving us the tools today and Susie Estrada for her depth of insight. They'll be here next time on Impact in Action, so you know what to do. Until next week, if you enjoy this podcast, show it some love. That could be a 5-star rating or a review. We'll take what you have. This was Impact in Action, a podcast from MGT, provider of technological and social impact solutions. As always, our production coordinator was Sarah Bailly, supervision from Tiffany Reynolds. You might know it by now, but we make this podcast with the team at Lower Street. Writing and production from Lise Lavati, sound design by Ben Crannell. I'm your host, Chase Christiansen. Come back soon. We'll be here on Impact in Action.